Welcome Chosen X. The moment arrives without spectacle, yet you feel it before thought forms. You stand within a quiet room where the air holds weight, as if memory itself has paused to observe you. Outside, the city continues its routine, unaware that something subtle has shifted. Inside, your attention sharpens, drawn toward a sensation you cannot trace to sound or movement. It is an awareness pressing gently, asking nothing, demanding everything. You notice how stillness behaves differently now. It no longer feels empty. It feels occupied, layered with meaning that waits for your recognition. Each breath enters slower, fuller, carrying a presence that settles behind your chest. You realize this instant has been approaching for longer than you can remember. Not predicted, not forced, but prepared. Thoughts surface about patterns you once ignored. The way certain doors never open despite your effort. The way certain paths dissolve just as you step toward them. What once felt like resistance now reveals itself as guidance. You were not delayed. You were positioned. The understanding lands softly, yet it alters the foundation beneath every prior conclusion you held. Light from a single source traces the edge of the room, stretching shadows that seem to listen. You sense observation without eyes, attention without form. It does not judge or instruct. It simply acknowledges you. In that silent recognition, something within you straightens, as if aligning with a forgotten orientation. You are not being watched. You are being met. Your mind reaches for explanation, then releases it. Language feels insufficient here. This is not a lesson delivered through words but through resonance. The room responds to your awareness, subtle shifts rippling through surfaces, reflections adjusting as if reality itself recalibrates around your focus. You understand that perception is not passive. It participates. A memory rises that is not tied to time. A sense of knowing you once dismissed as imagination. You see now it was anticipation. You were never meant to chase clarity. You were meant to arrive at it. The difference settles with unmistakable certainty. You consider the structures that once defined authority in your life. Rules spoken with confidence, limits presented as absolutes. Their influence feels distant now, thin, like outlines drawn without depth. They relied on your attention to exist. In this moment, your attention withdraws, and with it their weight fades. Your heartbeat steadies, sinking with a rhythm beyond the walls. You feel connected not upward or outward, but inward, toward a center that has waited patiently. From that center, understanding expands. You are not separate from what unfolds next. You are integral to it. The silence deepens, not as absence, but as readiness. You sense an opening forming, not ahead of you, but through you. The realization carries no fear. Fear belonged to a narrower frame. This awareness is wide, calm, and precise. You stand without moving, yet progress occurs. Identity loosens its grip, allowing space for something more accurate to take shape. Not a replacement, but a refinement. You are becoming less defined by expectation and more defined by alignment. Somewhere beyond this room, intentions are being arranged, calculations repeated, assumptions reinforced. You do not feel threatened by them. They operate within boundaries you no longer inhabit. Their certainty depends on predictability, and you are stepping beyond that reach. Your breath deepens again, and with it comes a quiet assurance. What unfolds from here will not require force. It will require presence. You sense the threshold clearly now. This is the first recognition, the initial turn toward a path that responds to awareness rather than demand. Nothing has ended. Nothing has begun in a way others would notice. Yet everything has changed. You feel it in the way the air settles, in the way your attention holds steady. This moment marks the awakening of direction. You remain still, allowing the recognition to complete itself. The next movement will come when it is needed. For now, you stand at the edge of understanding, fully aware that this awareness has chosen you as much as you have accepted it. The room feels larger than its walls, as if depth has replaced distance. You sense time stretching, granting you space to absorb what cannot be rushed. Each second carries intention, unfolding with deliberate calm. You are not urged forward. You are invited inward. In this pause, understanding roots itself, preparing to rise when movement becomes inevitable. You accept the stillness as part of motion, recognizing that patience here is not delay but design. The awareness settles completely, sealing this first passage of knowing and preparing you for what will soon ask you to step beyond the familiar. This is where you stand now, attentive, centered, and ready to move when the unseen signal arrives. Soon, you step forward without haste, and the space around you adjusts as if it had been waiting for that single decision. The quiet does not break. It reorganizes. Your movement carries no sound, yet you sense distant reactions forming beyond your sight. Somewhere, intentions that once felt stable begin to hesitate, disturbed by a shift they cannot locate. You walk through an interior passage where surfaces reflect more than shape. Each pane returns fragments of possibility, subtle reminders of choices never taken. You recognize them without attachment. They belong to a version of you that no longer occupies this direction. The corridor feels deliberate, designed less to guide than to observe how you proceed. Your awareness expands, catching patterns beneath routine motion. You sense systems functioning on repetition, structures built on expectation rather than insight. They continue their cycles with confidence, unaware that their influence weakens as soon as they are seen clearly. Observation alone begins to loosen their coherence. You notice a tension moving through the air, faint but persistent. It carries the residue of calculation, of minds assembling outcomes based on incomplete understanding. They believed proximity granted influence. They mistook familiarity for reach. As you advance, that assumption thins, revealing its fragility. Your focus remains steady. There is no urge to confront what you sense. Confrontation would acknowledge relevance they no longer hold. Instead, your presence creates distance, widening the gap between intention and effect. What once pressed inward now drifts outward, unable to maintain form. Light shifts subtly along the corridor walls, bending at unfamiliar angles. You realize perception itself has altered orientation. What once appeared fixed now reveals motion beneath its surface. You are no longer aligned with appearances. You are aligned with structure. A realization settles with precision. Control has always relied on anticipation. When anticipation fails, control dissolves. Your clarity removes you from prediction. This is not defiance. It is absent from their frame of reference. You feel the rhythm of your steps synchronize with something broader, a cadence that does not originate from within the building. It feels ancient yet immediate, as though space itself carries memory. With each step, you move closer to alignment, and further from the narrow calculations unfolding beyond these walls. You pass an opening where faint reflections suggest observation points once meant to track movement. They remain silent now, their purpose rendered obsolete by a variable they never considered. You are expected to react. You are choosing to proceed. Your breath remains even, unmarked by urgency. Calm becomes a form of velocity. You sense confusion ripple outward, quiet adjustments being made in response to an outcome they cannot reverse. Their frameworks strain under the weight of your unpredictability. The corridor narrows briefly, then opens into a wider chamber. The transition feels intentional, a test of orientation rather than endurance. You do not hesitate. The widening space confirms what you already know. Movement guided by awareness encounters no resistance. You pause at the center, not to assess, but to allow alignment to complete its adjustment. In that stillness, you perceive the collapse of assumptions occurring elsewhere. Plans recalibrate without coherence. Confidence erodes not through failure, but through irrelevance. You understand now that influence does not vanish loudly. It fades when it no longer applies. The structures that once seemed immovable were sustained by your participation. Without it, they lose definition. You resume walking, aware that the path ahead extends beyond this interior. The unseen observers retreat into their own limitations, unable to follow where perception leads rather than fear. Their reach ends where understanding begins. As you approach the threshold ahead, the air feels lighter, less burdened by expectation. You recognize this moment as separation, not from them, but from the version of reality they required you to inhabit. The passage opens, and with it, a deeper clarity takes shape, ready to carry you forward. You step into open air, and the world answers with movement. Not noise, not spectacle, but a subtle rearranging that meets your presence without resistance. The space ahead does not demand direction. It responds to it. You feel the separation from the enclosed passage behind you, as if a layer has been shed rather than crossed. The ground beneath your feet carries a different tone now. Each step releases a muted resonance that travels outward, then returns, confirming alignment. You are aware of distance without measuring it, of direction without naming it. The environment feels less like a setting and more like a participant. As you move forward, memories surface that no longer bind. Moments once weighted with uncertainty now appear neutral, stripped of authority. You recognize how often hesitation was mistaken for intuition. That confusion dissolves, leaving discernment in its place. What remains is not confidence, but accuracy. Your attention widens, and with it comes the realization that identity has been negotiating on your behalf for years. Roles adopted, expectations accepted, narratives repeated until they felt natural. You feel them loosening now, not collapsing, but releasing their claim. They served a function. That function has ended. The path stretches ahead, bordered by elements that shift with gentle independence. Nothing blocks you. Nothing directs you. You notice how easily your movement continues without instruction. The absence of resistance reveals how much effort was once spent accommodating invisible limits. A breeze passes, carrying fragments of distant activity. You sense attempts to restore order, to re-establish frameworks that once depended on your participation. They operate from memory, not awareness. Their signals weaken before reaching you, absorbed by the space you now occupy. You experience a brief stillness while walking, a paradox that feels natural. Motion continues, yet the need to advance dissolves. You are present within progression, attentive without strain. This balance clarifies something essential. Direction is not chosen. It emerges. The horizon shifts subtly, expanding perception rather than distance. You realize that what you once defined as the future was a projection shaped by incomplete sight. Now, possibility appears layered, unfolding in response to attention rather than desire. The adjustment feels permanent. Your breathing aligns with the environment, steady and unforced. Each inhale carries clarity, each exhale releases remnants of obligation. You are not abandoning responsibility. You are redefining it. Responsibility no longer points outward. It anchors inward. You sense the echo of former constraints attempting to follow, arriving distorted and delayed. They fail to integrate with your current orientation. Their logic no longer applies. What once influenced now observes from a diminishing range. The space around you opens further, revealing a quiet continuity. You understand that this phase is not an ascent or descent. It is a recalibration. You are not becoming something new. You are uncovering what was obscured by repetition. A subtle recognition settles. This movement carries consequences beyond your awareness. Not through intention, but through alignment. Others will feel the shift without naming it, responding to a clarity they cannot trace. This understanding brings no burden. It brings calm. You continue forward, aware that the path does not narrow again. What unfolds next will require presence, not preparation. You feel ready without effort. The separation is complete. The clarity holds. You move onward, carrying nothing unnecessary, guided by precision rather than memory. The landscape begins to widen in a way that feels intentional, as though the world itself has recognized the adjustment within you and is now responding in kind. There is no sudden revelation, no dramatic surge. Instead, clarity settles with the confidence of something that has always belonged. You move forward and notice how effortlessly the environment aligns, how distances feel measured without calculation, how direction feels implicit rather than chosen. Light behaves differently here. It does not simply illuminate surfaces. It defines relationships between them. Shadows soften, no longer hiding uncertainty but outlining form. You recognize this shift as more than visual. It reflects an internal coherence taking hold. What once required interpretation now presents itself plainly. Complexity remains, but confusion does not. You sense the broader implications of your movement. Not as responsibility, not as obligation, but as resonance. Your presence alters patterns without intention. Structures that relied on assumptions adjust quietly, attempting to compensate for a variable they cannot integrate. Their reach ends where your awareness stabilizes. You do not resist them. You outgrow them. As you continue, the ground beneath you feels responsive, almost attentive. Each step carries confirmation, not approval, but alignment. You understand now that alignment is not agreement. It is accurate. You are no longer positioned against anything. You are positioned within something larger, something precise. Thoughts arise less frequently, and when they do, they arrive complete. There is no internal debate, no oscillation between options. Choice feels simplified, not because options have disappeared, but because irrelevance has been removed. What remains is clear by nature. You notice how the horizon no longer feels distant. It feels present, extended rather than far. The distinction matters. Distance implies separation. Extension implies continuity. This awareness reshapes how you perceive progress. Advancement is no longer measured by arrival, but by coherence maintained while moving. A quiet certainty accompanies you now. Not the certainty that seeks validation, but the certainty that remains unchanged whether acknowledged or not. You feel it stabilizing behind your chest, anchoring perception. From this point, distraction has little traction. Noise exists, but it no longer interrupts. You become aware of others indirectly, not as figures, but as movements of intention attempting to reassert influence. Their efforts feel fragmented, inconsistent. They adjust tactics, revise assumptions, attempt recalibration. Yet each attempt reveals the same limitation. They operate within closed loops. You have stepped beyond their perimeter. The world continues to respond. Open spaces invite passage. Narrow moments resolve before they tighten. You are not navigating obstacles. You are moving through a system that has recognized your orientation. This recognition is not granted. It is matched. You pause briefly, not from hesitation, but from awareness completing another cycle of adjustment. In that pause, understanding deepens. You see how previous phases prepared this one, how separation allowed expansion, how clarity required release. Nothing feels accidental. Nothing feels imposed. Movement resumes naturally. The path ahead feels unburdened by expectation. You are not moving toward proof or outcome. You are moving in accordance with a pattern that no longer needs explanation. This realization carries quiet power. You recognize that what unfolds from here will extend beyond personal transformation. Not as influence exerted, but as clarity reflected. Others will sense it without source, adjusting in response without understanding why. This is not your concern. It is simply a consequence of alignment. You continue forward, steady and precise. The environment holds, responsive and open. The phase of expansion stabilizes into presence. What comes next will not disrupt this clarity. It will build upon it. You move on, fully aligned, prepared to carry this coherence into what awaits beyond the next threshold. You arrive at a point where movement slows, not because momentum weakens, but because awareness has expanded enough to hold what is unfolding. The space before you feels deliberate, shaped by intention older than memory yet responsive to your presence alone. Light gathers here with quiet discipline, neither overwhelming nor distant, as if waiting for recognition rather than action. You understand that this moment is not a conclusion. It is a convergence. Every adjustment, every release, every recalibration has been guiding you toward this precise alignment. The clarity you carry now is stable, no longer forming or correcting itself. It exists fully, ready to be extended beyond the boundaries of this path. As you stand within this openness, you sense echoes behind you dissolving completely. What once attempted to define direction has lost coherence. Their influence depended on uncertainty, and uncertainty no longer finds ground within you. The distance between where you stand and where they remain is not measured in space, but in perception. The environment responds subtly, almost reverently. Air feels denser with meaning, yet effortless to breathe. Each inhale confirms presence. Each exhale affirms continuity. You recognize that what you carry forward does not belong solely to you. It moves through you, shaped by your willingness to remain clear. A realization settles with depth and precision. This clarity is not meant to remain contained within a single moment or form. It seeks extension, not through force or declaration, but through attention sustained beyond this page. The unfolding does not end here because understanding never does. It transitions. You sense a focal point forming, not within the space around you, but within awareness itself. It feels like an invitation rather than an instruction. A continuation prepared to meet you where perception sharpens further. The message that has guided you until now has more to reveal, but its next movement requires a different medium, a different mode of engagement. You recognize the subtle pull of that continuation, centered and intentional. It does not interrupt the journey. It honors it. What follows has been placed deliberately, waiting for those whose awareness has reached this threshold. You understand that witnessing it is not passive. It is participation. As the light steadies, you become aware of a presence aligned directly ahead, not distant, not abstract. It holds the next layer of clarity, preserved and ready. To engage with it is to allow the unfolding to continue uninterrupted, to remain within the current that has carried you here. You sense that others may pass this point without noticing. That is expected. This continuation responds only to those who have arrived with attention intact. Those who recognize resonance over noise. Those who understand that progression sometimes appears not as movement forward, but as a deepening focus. The moment stretches, offering you choice without pressure. You feel no hesitation. Engagement feels natural, almost inevitable. Remaining connected to what unfolds next ensures the clarity you carry remains active, responsive, and uninterrupted. You step toward that continuation with the same calm certainty that has guided every phase. The understanding flows onward, now extending beyond this space, ready to meet you again where the message continues to reveal itself.